Dogman fighting the Rake. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I have a story that I don't even believe. My girlfriend, I think, caused this to happen, and even she doesn't believe me. I saw a battle to the finish between two creatures that are not even supposed to exist. This slender man-like, pale, thin Rake creature versus a North American upright walking canine, aka the Pennsylvania Dogman. Let's call my girlfriend Samantha, because she fancies herself a witch. I wanted to go camping, but she only agreed if we could camp in or near a haunted spot. I really was not into that. It seems like asking for trouble. I, for the most part, don't believe in magic or superstitions, but I also don't believe in tempting fate. Like, I don't think walking under a ladder brings bad luck, but if I notice a ladder, I will avoid walking under it just in case, you know? But she's my girlfriend, and it meant camping alone with her, so I was willing to accept any conditions she set up. We live together now, but back then when this happened, it was hard for us to find alone time. We borrowed my cousin's old Toyota for the weekend and drove out to Samantha's choice location, Egg Hill. You see, Egg Hill Church is the location of a supposed massacre where a priest did his entire congregation in, one by one, like in a Michael Myers movie. We found a nice spot near there, a bit south by Sinking Creek, so that we'd have a natural source of water. Samantha insisted that running water made magic happen better because of this or that pseudo-scientific reason that made no sense to me. I just don't like being thirsty. That's the magic of clean running water to me. So after dinner, Samantha did this really dumb thing that she got me involved with too. We sat by the fire and used this old Ouija board, right? And she called for all malevolent spirits to make themselves known. Why would somebody do something like that? Clearly, to me, she sees life as some sort of game. Either that, or she doesn't know what the word malevolent means. Don't ask for evil to show up in your life. It does that often enough, even if you avoid inviting it in. At any rate, the evil didn't come looking for her. It came looking for me. I needed to pee, but also the two of us had started bickering and arguing over the Ouija board, and I just wanted a break from the fighting. I walked into the tree line, and then I kept walking for a while. I needed some emotional space from Samantha, and somehow creating more physical space between us helped me feel a little better. I was deep into my self-pity when I finally finished relieving myself and noticed a commotion happening deeper into the forest. Turning around first to make sure I knew the way back to camp, I then ventured a bit further into the darkness until I saw them. I was able to hide behind a crooked tree and get a pretty good view of them without them seeing me. It was a battle between a Rake, which is something I had read about in creepypasta but didn't think was real, and some kind of wolfman or dogman. The ears and face did resemble some kind of wolf or prehistoric dog, but the body was in some ways creepily almost human. Although the hind legs were lupine or wolf-like, it used them to stand upright like a human, not like a dog. The front legs appeared to have evolved into a longer, deadlier version of human arms, with fingernails like daggers. If the dogman's claws were as long as daggers, the Rake's claws were swords in comparison. While the dogman had large paws that were very nearly hand-like and looked as though they could be used to handle tools, the Rake's long fingernail weapons were so absurdly, nightmarishly long that they made the hands basically useless for doing anything but viciously destroying any form of life in its vicinity that seemed edible. I knew that from the creepypastas that I had read. The Rake feeds off of scaring humans, true, but he also devours any life form he's able to defeat and slice apart with those nightmare fingers. I think the Rake saw the Dogman as food, and I think the Dogman saw the Rake as one of his only true enemies. I don't think he wanted him destroyed so that he could eat him. I think the Dogman wanted the Rake destroyed for his own safety. I watched as the pale, almost glowing monstrosity charged forward toward the Dogman, and I saw the Dogman retreat, screaming, swatting the super long fingernails away, and not coming out of it unharmed. The Dogman would be down on all fours when attacking, but would stand up on his hind legs when in retreat, so that he could use his arms to bat off the Rake's advancing attack. I think I gasped at one exchange between the two, and the Rake stopped his attack on the Dogman, and in one lightning quick movement, turned his head to stare directly at me. He had been a flurry of activity moving so amazingly fast that the eye could not follow, but once it heard my presence, it locked its large, glowing orbs onto me and froze so still he looked like a wax figure. It was all I could do to not run away, but I sensed that this thing could move quickly, even if it looked so ill-proportioned and bizarre. I've read creepypasta about this kind of a creature on its hind legs, and I've read about them being quadrupedal. This one so far had stayed down on all fours. Once that Rake saw me, his attention was captivated. It was unmistakable and terrifying at the time. I didn't know why, but after researching the Rake on the internet since this happened, I do now have a theory. Whereas the Dogman only represented something to eat, I, as a human being, represented something to drive insane and torture to death, and then eat. He just lost interest in that Dogman and began to walk in my direction. His canine opponent was having none of that, however, and I watched as the Dogman tore his long claws all the way down the side of the blindingly white, dead-looking creature. The slicing move would have been enough to leave me on the ground, my life bleeding out all around me. The Rake reacted in discomfort briefly, but there was no blood coming out of those wounds. The only thing the Dogman had succeeded in doing was getting that nasty old Rake to forget about me again and to focus entirely on the Dogman. The next part happened so fast that it was almost hard to see. The pale killing machine sliced his opponent up so badly that I literally cannot describe it on this channel. The once terrifying and proud canine cryptid was done in swiftly, cruelly, unemotionally, and methodically. And once the one was sliced into many, the Rake made haste, beginning to devour what he had created. I ran back to camp, wondering how long it takes a Rake to eat a Dogman. Whatever the answer was, that was also the answer to the amount of time that Sam and I had to get out of there. When I reached our tent, I began packing smaller items up quickly, and I threw sand on the fire that Samantha was still sitting by. She asked me what was going on, and I think I just said something like, "Humor me and run to the car as fast as you can go." Fortunately, she did, because when I eventually told her what we were running from, she did not believe me. She still doesn't believe me, but I'm telling her and you the truth. I don't expect you to believe me either. Rakes and werewolves don't exist. Therefore, I couldn't possibly be telling the truth about the time I saw Dogman fighting the Rake. The BEK and the Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I want to tell you a story about a night I experienced that was like a Halloween night from a horror movie. I don't mean that it happened on October 31st. It was actually a cold night in late November or early December. That night was the only time I've ever seen a Dogman, and the circumstances under which it happened aren't really like any other Dogman story I've ever heard anyone else tell. And it didn't start off like it was a Dogman story at all. I was having a dream that someone was ringing my doorbell in the middle of the night. I felt a sense of dread about looking to see who it was, since I never expect visitors so late. When I looked out the windows, I couldn't see anyone there. In the dream, I turned around to go back to bed, but then the doorbell rang again and again. Eventually, it woke me up because it was the actual doorbell to my house ringing some time after midnight. Just as in the dream, I was afraid to answer the door, but unlike in the dream, I brought my Cecil Cooper model baseball bat with me as I walked nervously down the stairs. I had never been scared to answer my front door before, and I found it made me see everything in an entirely new light. My senses were far more alert, for one thing. I noticed that if I stood on one particular step in the middle of the stairwell and looked into the hallway mirror, I could see a reflection from the mirror in the front lobby of one of the windows looking out onto the area in front of the front door. So I could see a reflection of... No, not the Dogman, but two young teenagers, or tweens maybe. I thought they were both boys, but I was not getting a clear view of their entire faces. Rather than make me feel less frightened, this made me feel more. The houses on my block were and are spaced far enough apart with trees and nature in between that they feel sort of private, but we aren't isolated. There are 5 other families living on this block alone, so why had these two been ringing my bell, and my bell alone, for such a long period of time? I didn't like it. There was something odd or off about it. I studied them through the window, dressed so oddly. The one looked like he was a newsboy from the 1800s, including a little old-fashioned cap like I'd only seen in old movies before. The other one had a little Lord Fauntleroy look about him, wearing a white frilled collar from out of medieval times. What Halloween party had they come from? I stood there watching just a second too long because suddenly it seemed they had noticed me there. "Hey, mister," the one with the hat shouted. "Hey, mister, it's an emergency. We need to call our mother." I felt guilty. They just needed to call their mother. They were so underdressed for such a cold night. They must have been freezing. Maybe they were too cold to run to the next house to try their bell. My mind started making excuses for them out of guilt, trying to rearrange the facts so that I should do as they asked me to do. I walked over to the front door with every intention of letting them in. Heck, I was going to bring them in to warm them up. I marched over quickly, and then, at the last second before reaching for the doorknob, I glanced out the window at the little Lord Fauntleroy one. He didn't appear to be cold. I mean, his body posture was not one of a shivering person. A voice inside me told me to not open that door, but I had to. There were cold children outside. I opened the inside door, but kept the outer screen door locked. The boy in the hat didn't seem all that uncomfortable in the cold weather either. Both of them looked down, like they were depressed or something. The one with the hat spoke forcefully and rudely to me before I could say anything. "You have to invite us inside, mister," he said. "We have to call our mother." I decided to change the subject. "Aren't you cold?" I asked. And as I did so, I could see my breath in front of my mouth. That's how cold the air was. I hadn't seen that smoky effect when the kid spoke, though. I looked at the one with the hat, standing there, his brim hiding his eyes, and I asked him again, "Aren't you cold, son?" Unexpectedly, the other kid, the little Lord Medieval Times theater guy, barked out at me. "He said you have to invite us inside," in this voice way deeper than I had been expecting. He looked up at me with hate on his face, and I saw his eyes, clearly, for the first time. He had no whites to his eyes. They were solid black like ink or oil, just shiny, wet blackness like a void, a negation of reality. I looked at the newsboy kid and he looked up at me with angry black eyes as well. I told you already, mister. We have to call our mother on your phone. And when I heard that voice, when I saw that face speaking that voice, I could tell this was not what it appeared to be. This was not a lost kid. I slammed the door in horror. Those were not children. They couldn't be. The two small people wailed outside my front door, demanding that I let them in. They screamed so loudly that I half expected my neighbors to come over asking what their trouble was. To be honest, I probably wouldn't have minded some company. I went upstairs and pulled the covers up over my head, too scared to look outside anymore. At length, the wailing stopped and the black-eyed kids apparently moved on. I didn't hear them walk away, but I didn't hear them outside anymore either. I wanted to go back to sleep, but I couldn't calm down. Something told me to go downstairs and take one more look around outside the house. There was nothing and nobody out front or down the left side of the house. When I got to the back, however, eyeshine immediately caught my notice. Staring intently, I could swear I saw the outline of the figure with the eyeshine, and that figure had to be 8 feet tall, with pointed ears up on top of its head, and that was not a human. For some reason, once the black-eyed kids left, I next found myself haunted by the Dogman. I knew this had something to do with the black-eyed creatures that had been at the front door. Either these were all demonic entities, or they were all from outer space, or something. Somehow they were part of the same world or reality as each other, if that makes sense. Our world was being invaded by their world, or their world was taking over. Another possibility is that these things come from underground. Maybe they exist in the same physical sense as you and me, but they just live deep underneath us. I'm not really sure exactly what I'm saying, but I am trying to say it very passionately. You don't just get a visit from strange kids with space alien eyes, and then get stalked by a tall, furry man with a wolf head, both in the same night. That wasn't random. The one had something to do with the other, even if I cannot now, nor ever will be able to tell you exactly how those two were both part of the same thing. I discovered that I could get the best view of the dog-headed man from the kitchen on the ground floor, so I stood there staring at it for a while. It really was hard to make out much besides the eyes and the overall body shape, which was like a professional wrestler with dog's legs. I remembered that my camera with a decent zoom on it was in the next room, so I went and got it, then came back to the kitchen. I pointed the camera at the Dogman, but before I could even look at it through the camera lens, the beast burst out of the tree line he had been standing in and came running directly toward me. I accidentally flipped the camera into the air as I screeched and ran out into the next room to run upstairs like the little chicken that I am. Even from upstairs, I could hear the Dogman banging on the wall of my house downstairs. I was convinced that he was going to get in and make mincemeat out of me. I picked up the phone and dropped it 3 times before I was finally able to call 911. I got my info out, and the guy on the line told me to stay on the phone with him until the cops arrived. And then the call got dropped. I heard the Dogman downstairs making a sound that was not unlike a howl, but also not unlike a very sad-sounding moan. He was walking around the house now, banging randomly on the walls. He seemed to be walking counterclockwise, moaning and banging. And then the doorbell rang and I went through the roof. I listened and I couldn't hear the Dogman anymore. It must be the little people with the black eyes. Now they were back to torment me more. How long was it going to take for the police to arrive? The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. I was so tired, and I was so sick of being scared. I grabbed my baseball bat and opened my window, leaning out and ready to throw my bat at the two annoying space alien-eyed cretins. Only it wasn't them. It was the cops. They had driven up with their sirens off because my neighborhood pays most of the taxes for this part of the state. I had never heard them arrive. The cops told me everything was ship-shape and no prowlers were on my property. I thanked them profusely and they left, telling me to get some sleep. I did not. Not until the sun came up anyway. I do not know why those black-eyed creatures or the Dogman came on that night. Unfortunately for my health, they have never come back, at least so far. I cannot explain anything about the presence or behavior of either of these entities, and I will never even begin to fathom the truth behind the black-eyed kids and the Dogman. A poem for today's executive producer, George Martinez. Thank you, George. Together we forge. Thank you, Jorge. Hip, hip, Jorge. Please join us in thanking Jorge Martinez for making this episode possible. Here's our TV spokesdog, Henry Lee Dogman, to explain how you too can become a Scary Stories channel member. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.